It's a real pleasure to welcome you all to the 2019 federal election All Candidates Forum hosted by Moving in the Livable Region and the Vancouver Sun. At this time, I would also like to welcome our online viewers watching from home, work, wherever you are across this region, live on our online feed. I would also like to extend a special welcome to all the elected officials joining us today. Mayor Jonathan Cote, Chair of the Mayor's Council, Mayor of the City of New Westminster, and if there are any other elected officials who have snuck into this room without us noticing. Oh, there we go. Councillor Bly from City of Vancouver. And to any of the members of the press, just before we begin, the elected officials, stakeholders, and candidates who are available for comment will be taking questions in relation to this event in this room after the event ends. As I mentioned before, Moving the Livable Region is excited to co-host this event with the Vancouver Sun. I would now like to invite Harold Monroe, Editor-in-Chief, to say a few words on behalf of the Vancouver Sun.
Thank you. Thank you, Elder Margaret, for welcoming us here today. I know you're all here on this soggy Monday afternoon because you care about livability in this region. It's a region of 2.5 million people. It's expected to grow by another million over the next 20 years or so, and that includes 600,000 additional jobs. All that in 20 years, which of course is just a mere blip in time when you think about how long it takes to plan and execute major infrastructure projects. Fortunately, we live in a region where our local politicians and our business leaders, TransLink, many others, recognize transportation as a priority. Now, they don't always agree on the details, but I think there's general agreement that we need to continually improve how we move people and goods. And there's a role, and why we're here today, there's a role to play for the party or parties, depending on the outcome of the election, who form the next federal government. And I know at times we feel, Ottawa and Toronto can feel like they're a long ways away from Metro Vancouver, and our important role as the Pacific Gateway, our ports and airports and our highways and our rail lines, they don't really get the attention they deserve sometimes from central Canada, and we write about that all the time in the Vancouver Sun. I'll be very interested, therefore, to hear from the parties represented today about what they see as the federal government's role in keeping people and the economy moving in Metro Vancouver. I'd encourage the participants to please be specific in their answers and to answer direct questions directly so that we can get a good sense of it, and those watching at home as well. This is being webcast, as mentioned earlier, and it's being webcast also live on vancouversun.com. And we will post later some highlights, videos from the debate as well. So my thanks to Moving in a Livable Region for organizing the event and for inviting the Vancouver Sun along for the ride. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harold. Folks, we have the opportunity today to hear from the four federal parties present on a number of topics affecting livability in our region. Moving in a Livable Region is committed to making Metro Vancouver more resilient, more equitable, economically viable, and healthy. MLR is an exercise in collaboration among stakeholders from different sectors across this region. Our stakeholders represent government organizations, industry representatives, environmental groups, active transportation, academics and student organizations, UBC and SFU, Vancouver Coastal Health, shared mobility representatives, our boards of trade, business associations, and other non-governmental organizations. We have a big group over here that care a lot about this region and come together to make this a more livable place for everybody. One of the most important requirements in accomplishing our goal of making this region more livable and affordable is having a strong partner in our federal government. And today, voters across this region will have the opportunity to identify who that partner could be for them. Now, without any further delay, I think we want to get to exactly why we came here. It's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for this forum. Shauna Sylvester is the Executive Director of the SFU Morris J. Wass Center for Dialogue and serves as the lead facilitator for MLR. To start off the event, she will introduce our candidates and the format, so please join me in welcoming Shauna Sylvester.
So, I wanted to make sure I didn't die there in the tumble that comes. Hello, everyone, and welcome. It is so great to see you. I see familiar faces. I see some active transportation allies in the room. I see incredible government support folks. I see candidates. I see people who have put themselves on the line to stand up for our communities. And I want to begin by saying we don't give enough credit to people who put themselves forward for elected office. So I'd like to begin with just a thank you to all of our candidates and to all the individuals who do put themselves forward. A big thank you if you join me in a round of applause. What I'd like to do before I introduce our candidates is give you a sense of the run of show. So, the debate, how's it going to look? Well, each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. Then we have 3 questions that are coming from our Moving in a Livable Region representatives, and they'll have a minute each to respond to those questions, which isn't very much time. So I hope that people will get to the point immediately. Then we're going to open it up to the audience. When you ask your question, you can have 30 seconds. If you go to a minute, I will cut you off. And if you haven't seen me moderate before, you know I will cut you off. To help us along in some of the timekeeping, we have Sabrina and Calvin from the center. At 30 seconds, Calvin will hold up a yellow, and at 1 minute, Sabrina will hold up the red. When it hits 1 minute, that means time, so you want to stop at that point. At the end of the questions, we'll go back to the candidates for a 2-minute closing. Everybody set? Okay. Well, let me introduce our candidates, and I'm thrilled to do so. So I'm going to ask Andrew Saxon, because you're sitting right here, Andrew, you're going to go first. Andrew Saxon was first elected Member of Parliament for North Vancouver in 2008 and served from 2008 until 2015 as a representative of the Conservative Party. He has worked in real estate development and investment as the CEO of King George Financial Group. Listed as his priorities, Andrew is campaigning on investment in new green technologies, housing affordability, stimulating economic growth, and reducing traffic congestion to the North Shore. Andrew, please join me on the stage. Thank you. Now, Jesse, you're going to have to do the gauntlet here as we try and get you up the stairs. Jesse Brown, Green Party, Vancouver Centre. Jesse Brown has been involved in Vancouver Central Local Committee for more than a decade, first as a volunteer and educator with Youth Co., a youth-led organization that works on issues related to sexual health and harm reduction. He is currently serving as the Executive Director of the Vancouver Friends for Life Society. His priorities are addressing the housing affordability crisis and the need to transition to an environmentally sustainable economy. Welcome, Jesse. Welcome. And can we get you in there? My apologies, this is a kind of narrow stage. Talib Nur Mohammed, Liberal Party, Vancouver, Granville. Talib Nur Mohammed served as the board of Covenant House, Vancouver. He has also served on the boards of the Confederation Center for the Arts and the Kerner Foundation and the Alan J. McEachran Institute of Public Policy. He has held executive roles at VRBO and Farfetch, and has worked for the Government of Canada. He was named one of Business of Vancouver's top 40 under 40. Welcome, Talib. Breen Willett was the first Métis lawyer in BC to be granted permission to wear a Métis sash when called to the bar. Breen has served as one of the Commission Council lawyers for the National Inquiry into the murdered and missing women, Indigenous women and girls, and Two-Spirit people. He previously held the role of Director of IT for the Métis Nation, Saskatchewan. His priorities are social and co-op housing, ending homelessness, protection of public assets, climate responsibility, prosecuting tax evasion of the super rich, pay equity, protecting Indigenous people, and ending on the blood ban of LGBTQ Two-Spirited and plus people. Breen Ouellette is the NDP candidate for Vancouver Centre. Am I correct? Yes. Breen, welcome. Now, have you been part of a lottery?
Not yet.
Not yet. Well, what I'm going to do then, do we have a lottery here? We have a lottery. In front of all of you, we're going to choose who is going to go and in what order. And then what we'll do at the end is we'll reverse that order. Okay, so here we are. Andrew, if you'd like to pick. Oh, first is New Democrat. So the first will be New Democrat. So Breen, that will be you first. Second will be Talib. Excuse me. Sure. This is. So you're each picking for each other, I think. At this stage, you're picking for each other. Here, let's just get back. Oh,
There we go.
there we go.
Third will be the Green Party.
The Green Party. So we are going this way. So I guess, Andrew, that makes you fourth. Okay, very well. Thank you so much. Thanks so much. Okay, so let us get going. We're going to start with Breen. You have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Hi, everyone. Somebody's microphone is picking up. My apologies. My name is Breen Ouellette. I'm 42 years old, and I'm a Métis man, originally from Saskatchewan. Several years ago, I had the great pleasure to meet Gil Penalosa of 880 Cities. For those of you who aren't aware of that organization, they advocate for creating vibrant, healthy cities and communities for everybody, regardless of their age, their gender, their socioeconomic or ethnic background. And Gil focuses on creating and designing parks and streets as meeting places for people, and also for promoting sustainable mobility across the board, whether we're talking about walking or cycling or transit or driving. And Gil taught me a really profound but simple rule, and it's called the 880 rule. And that rule says that if our city services are not accessible to people between the ages of 8 and 80, then we're not doing good enough. We have to do better. We have to make sure that they're accessible for all of those people. So if the streets aren't lit well enough for your 80-year-old grandmother to walk down the block, then we need to light them better. And if our bike lanes are not safe enough for your 8-year-old son or daughter to cycle down the street, then we have to do better. We have to make them safer. It's so easy to get caught up in impressive numbers that are thrown around during an election. Oh, is that the time?
That is the time. Breen, it comes really, really quickly. 2 minutes goes so fast.
It certainly does.
It certainly does. But we're going to make up for it in the questions. Talib, I believe you are on for your opening statement.
Thanks, Shauna. Thank you all. My name is Talib Nur Mohammed. I'm the Liberal candidate in Vancouver Granville. And I wanted to begin by thanking all of you for hosting this debate, because it's important for us to be able to actually talk about issues. And in the election cycles, often the things that matter most to people, the things that we all probably hear at the doors, are the things that often get forgotten. So, you know, I believe very, very strongly that our focus in this conversation is an important one. Talking about the climate, talking about mobility, talking about affordability and livability are the things that really matter to people. And, I reflect on my own experience, my parents' experience coming to this country with nothing and building our life here. And the things that I remember my parents telling me when I was very, very young are about the fact that we live in a country where anyone should be able to live affordably, comfortably, in a way that allows us to be our best. And I think our obligation when we're running for office really is to think about the way in which all levels of government, and starting with the federal level where much of the resource and opportunity lies, to really work with different levels of government to ensure that we are able to partner on issues like transportation, on building sustainable long-term ways for people to get around, neighborhoods where people can meet and gather and learn and celebrate. And perhaps most importantly, do that in a way in which we feel like we can do so without worrying where our next paycheck is going to come from. So I'm very grateful to be part of this conversation with all of you and to really focus our conversation on some of what's already been done, obviously by the government of the last 4 years, and some of the things that we can do. And I think there are tremendous opportunities for us in this city. We have the opportunity to create a subway line along Broadway that goes to UBC, where we will be able to increase mobility in the region. We have opportunities to partner on housing solutions that are sustainable, that are multi-generational, that partner with communities. And those are the types of things that I hope we'll be able to discuss today, because those are the things that are going to move our community forward. And those are the things that are going to allow us to rally around things together rather than focusing on the things that divide us. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Jesse.
Hi everyone, my name is Jesse Brown. I'm the Green Party candidate here in Vancouver Centre, and I'm a lifelong Metro Vancouver resident. I grew up in Ladner, which is on the unceded territory of the Tsawwassen people. I know what it's like to live in this city as a younger person. I had to drive to UBC from Ladner. I lived in Kitts and had to take the beeline to UBC at some point. Luckily, I live downtown now, and I feel so grateful because I get to walk to work. So I just feel like we need to get to a place where cities are livable, where you don't have to be stuck in traffic for an hour to get to where you need to go to do your job or to go to school. And that's why I'm so pleased to be running for the Green Party, because I feel like Elizabeth May and the Greens have the only plan in place to work with municipalities on a peer-to-peer level, where we want to fund municipalities, where we want to fund TransLink, and where we want to make sure that people can live properly in the city without spending time and energy wasted in traffic. People who can live affordably in the city through creating incentives and supporting municipalities again through, I think we're the only party that's going to have 1% of the GST going to municipalities to fund infrastructure projects, to fund housing projects, and to make sure that organizations like TransLink don't have to beg to the federal government year after year after year for long-term sustainable planning. So again, my name is Jesse Brown. I'm here with the Green Party in Vancouver Centre, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Jesse. Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Shauna. My name is Andrew Saxon. I'm the Conservative candidate for Member of Parliament in North Vancouver. When I was born in North Vancouver in 1964, the population of the North Shore was about 60,000 people, and we had 2 bridges to take us over town. Today, the population is over 180,000. We have thousands of people going through the North Shore to get to Whistler and to Horseshoe Bay. And we still have only 2 bridges to get over town. And this is just one example of the infrastructure deficit that exists in Canada. Now, when we were in government, the Conservative government, we sought to address this deficit with a $48 billion infrastructure stimulus program, which launched and completed thousands of infrastructure projects across the country in just 2 years. We also had a $2 billion per year permanent transfer to the provinces and territories, which came from the gas tax, and it still exists today, and it's increased at 2% per year. We also had $1 billion in the P3 Canada Fund and $1 billion in the Asia Pacific Gateway Corridor Initiative. Now, in contrast, this is election season. Over the last 4 years, the Liberals, on the other hand, have invested $35 billion in an infrastructure bank, which has financed a total of 4 projects in the past 4 years. And those were all rail projects in Toronto, Montreal, and Quebec City, not a single project in Vancouver. The Liberals also put about $1 million in an Asia Infrastructure Bank, which has built 0 projects in Canada, but is busy focusing on projects in Asia and Africa. A Conservative government will invest in new green technologies, making public transit more affordable, making electric vehicles more efficient and sustainable, and supporting farmers to make sure that their land is used in an environmentally sustainable fashion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we're just doing a quick check on, and well, I hope you're getting your questions ready because we've got 3 questions and then we're going to the audience. So we're looking for smart, pithy questions that really focuses on the region, looking at transportation, land use planning through resilience or climate change, health, equity, affordability, and economic development. So our first question will go to the chair of the Mayor's Council, Mayor Jonathan Cote, our mayor from New Westminster. And Julie has a mic. There you go.
Well, thank you very much, and really appreciate the opportunity to be having this dialogue about transportation in the federal elections. So I'll get right to my question. For the candidates, what is your party's vision for sustainable transportation in the region, but also across the country? And more specifically, what partnerships and funding partnerships are you is your party prepared to make with the Mayor's Council and TransLink after the upcoming election?
So a 2-pronged question there on sustainable. And we are going to go this time, we're going to go this way, and I will make sure, I'm going to mix it up, but I'll always make sure everybody gets the same amount of time. Okay, Andrew, we're going to start with you.
Thank you. I think it's a several-pronged approach. I mean, first of all, we need to encourage people to get out of their cars. If we're going to deal with the carbon footprint and with traffic, we have to get a way to get people out of their cars, which means we have to invest in public transportation. When we were in government, we invested in the Canada Line, for example, which is terrific because people come use that every day to get to and from Richmond and to the airport. So we have to invest in more sustainable public transportation. We've just launched, or we said that if we're elected, we will have a 15% rebate for people who have transit passes, monthly transit passes, for example. The other thing is for people who are using their cars, we're going to be off hydrocarbons in the next 10 years, maybe even sooner. We need to make sure that electric vehicles are affordable for people that are not affordable right now. We have to make sure that battery life is extended, that the disposal of batteries is done in a sustainable way, and that people are able to plug in their electric vehicles in more locations. So a Conservative government will invest more in infrastructure to help people with sustainable transportation needs.
Thank you so much. Over to you, Jesse.
So again, it feels great to be part of a party that really is the only authentic party when it comes to combating the climate crisis that we're facing right now. And again, 1% of our GST percentage will go to funding organizations like TransLink and municipalities. We want to ensure that sorry, I'm freezing here for a second. The question, yeah.
Yep, sustainable transportation and what funding partnerships.
Yeah, so, okay, 90% of organizations that are the biggest polluters are exempt from the carbon tax. So the Green Party is going to go after oil and gas industry, going to go after the subsidies that this current government and the Conservative government gives to the oil and gas industry to pay for infrastructure projects throughout Canada. Thank you.
Thank you. Caleb.
Thanks, Will. Look, I think it's great for Conservatives to promise what they will, because after 10 years when Andrew's time in government, we still have 2 bridges going to the North Shore and there's still no subway. So, I think it's important when we talk about investments, we talk about real things and what has been done and what can be done. So the Canada Line under Mr. Kretschmann and Mr. Martin was a $500 million investment in the Lower Mainland. In 2018, as Jonathan, the federal government committed to $2 billion of a $7 billion program to increase buses, to reduce overcrowding, 200 new SkyTrain cars, the Broadway subway extension to Arbutus and hopefully all the way to UBC, more handy-dart services, and more support for resources for walking and cycling infrastructure. But you have to walk the talk in government, right? And we've already put a price on pollution. We've got the most aggressive oceans protection strategy in the history of this country. And we've already started to do the things that are required to make sure that we can keep building over the next 4 years. And so, look, the choice is a clear one. You can have a Conservative government that can talk about, what pollution reduction they might do, but when Jason Kenney and his team decide that's not going to be the way that they think things should go, Mr. Scheer will back off. And we have a track record over the last 4 years of fighting and working with other parties to ensure there is a strong strategy for the climate.
Thanks so much. Over to you, Mr. Willett.
Thank you. So the people I talk to in Vancouver know that good public transit means that you've got good jobs, healthier communities, and the empowerment of everybody. And municipalities have been working hard to improve public transit, but the Liberals haven't stepped up with a long-term plan. And I know as a former director at the Métis Nation that you need reliable multi-year funding to be able to do the things you need to do. It can't be coming out in dribs and drabs. So as an NDP member of parliament, I will promote our plan to create good jobs, improve our air quality, and help commuters save money. We will prioritize and expand public transit through scale up of green zero emission vehicles. And we will work with cities to ensure that the entire fleet is electrified by 2030.
Okay, thank you very much. Second question is coming from south of the Fraser, from one of the business members of Moving in a Livable Region, the Executive Director, Elizabeth Modell, of the South Business Improvement, South Surrey Downtown Business Improvement Association. Thank you.
Thank you, Shauna. And all the candidates put their names forward in order to, is this working?
It is.
Put
Maybe
their
if you
names
step a
forward.
little bit forward,
Just
that
to
might
give
be
you a
helpful.
little frame up, south of the Fraser, I know you're from the North Shore as well as Vancouver Centre. South of the Fraser is one of the fastest growing regions in Canada. We're currently in Surrey representing 580,000 more or less in population and close to 1 million as we move out towards Abbotsford, etc. So my question is the impact on the economy, the movement of goods and services, the health of the citizens, as well as the connectivity towards south of the Fraser and the infrastructure that is so desperately required in that region in order to grow it. So if you are elected or your party is elected as either an individual with a private member's bill or as part of foreign government, what are you personally going to do to ensure the needs are met south of the Fraser, working with the Mayor's Council for congestion?
Thank you very much. And this time I'm going to ask Jesse to start, and we'll go Jesse, Talib, Breen, and Andrew.
Well, I think one of the first things that I would do would reach out to municipalities south of the Fraser and look at how we get people moving along Highway 99 into Vancouver. That's such a bottleneck at the Massey Tunnel. And I know there was a bridge proposal recently that was scrapped by the NDP government, but nothing has come in its replacement. So whatever the solution, whether it's twinning the tunnel, whether it's some other solution, we need to get people moving along Highway 99. I was also disappointed that Mayor McCallum scrapped the light rail plan in Surrey. So I would like to see more investment from the federal government to support that project, because I think it's a sustainable way to move people around the region and also connect Langley and Surrey to downtown Vancouver. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Talib.
Yeah, so first of all, on a personal note, I think this is an incredibly important issue for us to be dealing with. And I think, so you've asked what I would do personally, what my party would do. Look, we've already committed to 40% of funding for the strategy, as opposed to just single, politically, expedient projects. I think that's important, because if the region says this is what we need solutions for this, the federal government should be able to step up, and a Liberal government will step up to make that happen. I do think that we need to deal with the issue of the Massey Tunnel urgently. That is a critical issue, and it needs to be dealt with quickly. Federal government has already indicated that it will be a partner for whatever that solution that the community wants looks like. But I think more importantly, we also need to make sure that mobility south of the Fraser, whether it's SkyTrain, whether it's buses, whether it's the ability to be able to cycle safely, these are things that we need to support. And so Liberal government, and I would be an advocate for this every step of the way, will work hard to make sure that level of quality of life and that livability is brought south of the Fraser in a way that supports the community and what the community wants.
Thank you. Breen.
The money has to come from somewhere. And we haven't talked about that at all. And we're looking at climate crisis as a major motivator for improving our public transit. How do we do it? The NDP has committed to moving all the oil subsidies, which are in the billions annually to promoting renewable investments. So we need to get to a zero emission economy. And bridges and tunnels may help us get there, but we need the transit options as well. So I will back the NDP plan to completely eliminate oil subsidies and move them into the industries that are going to get us where we need to go.
Thank you. Andrew.
Thank you. When it comes, first of all, to funding projects, it was the Conservative government that brought in the gas tax fund, which has brought over $2 billion alone to British Columbia over the past 8 years. When it comes to federal provincial jurisdiction, keep in mind the federal jurisdiction is Highway 1. So getting to South Surrey is Highway 99. So the provincial government has to come up with their priorities. The federal government will traditionally partner with the provincial government, but it is up to the provincial government to come up with to identify their own priorities. What's really important is also to realize that a lot of the taxes that have been introduced by the Liberal government in the last 4 years are actually hurting businesses. The carbon tax, for example, the federal carbon tax, which is proven to be ineffective. It's not changing people's behavior. People are not getting out of their cars. We have to look at other ways of bringing down our carbon emissions. For example, there's a company in Squamish called Carbon Engineering that has technology to take carbon out of the air and turn it into energy. We need to get behind these companies so that Canada can be a world leader in green technology.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. Okay, we have Christine from the University of British Columbia, Alma Mater Society students. Christine.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to be a part of this and get to ask a question of you folks on behalf of young people living in Vancouver. Mobility and transportation, public infrastructure is an equity issue. We know that for immigrants, for young people, for Indigenous communities, it's absolutely critical to be able to access things like the SkyTrain, buses, to move around the cities. Young people are busy, they're starting new families, they have to go to school, they're working jobs to be able to support themselves. So my question for you is, how are you and your party going to prioritize supporting projects that benefit those who need it the most and are going to use it the most, like young Canadians? Thank you.
Okay. This time I'm going to ask Talib to start, and we're going to go to Talib, Andrew, Breen, and Jesse.
Well, thank you for that question, because I think it's a very important one. And I think if you look at the number of people that are affected by lack of access and what that does to quality of life, particularly access to healthcare, access to family, access to employment, it's a huge issue. And I'm really pleased that over the last 4 years, the Liberal government has made great strides in committing resources and funds to improving mobility through, for example, in my own writing, ensuring that Broadway subway gets built. And we're going to keep building on successes like that. But it's really about much more than that. It's about supporting the entire strategy that the region develops to increase mobility and to ensure that we are able to do it in a sustainable way. The fact that we're prepared to support the entire strategy rather than pick off projects is an indication of where our mindset is. And that mindset is that we have to do everything that we can do through partnership with the provincial government, which, by the way, is something that has happened in a meaningful way for the first time with this provincial government and the Liberal government federally, to move the agenda forward on critical projects, whether it's increasing bus service, whether it's increasing subway cars or SkyTrain cars, whether it's supporting the creation of bike lanes, so on and so forth, and that needs to continue.
Okay, thank you so much. Andrew.
Thank you. I correct Taleb because, as I mentioned earlier, it was the Conservative government that brought in the $48 billion infrastructure stimulus program in 2008, 2009, which saw thousands of projects across this country. And a lot of them were right here in Vancouver. We had to partner with the provinces and in many cases with municipalities and even with private groups. For example, on the North Shore, we've got the new North Shore Girls Soccer Bubble, which was a result of that program. Look, we need to make public transit more affordable. And that's why we're introducing a rebate for people who have monthly public transit passes. A lot of young people have transit passes. You're going to get a 15% rebate immediately if we're elected government. We're also increasing the government contribution to the registered education savings plans, which is going to help young people pay for their studies. We're also going to make federal government land more accessible for affordable housing. And this is groundbreaking, to use a pun, because it's the first time that any government has proposed that. We have to help young people. They're facing affordable housing crisis,
Okay,
and that's something that our government is going to address.
thank you so much. Over to you, Breen.
Well, the NDP wants to help young people, whether it's young families or students. Transit is one way that they can be helped for certain, but one of the biggest ways that we can do it is with tuition. And the NDP is committed to moving towards free tuition across the country. Another way that we can make it easier for young families is, as my colleagues have mentioned, housing. The NDP's plan is to return the focus to social and co-op housing in this country. We must remember that in the 1980s, homelessness was almost at zero in Vancouver. And since then, it's just gone up and up and up. And around that same time, the CMHC and the federal government stopped focusing on social housing and co-op housing. That's what the NDP wants to bring to Vancouver and the rest of the country.
And finally, Jesse.
Thank you for your question. The Green Party is the only party that's advocating for guaranteed livable income for all Canadians. So that's a really exciting policy where we will essentially plan to eliminate poverty through allowing people to live without the worry of having to pay for housing or not be able to live in the city that they want to. Micro units for students and looking at different ways that we can have more students living close to the school that they want to go to is another way that the Green Party will work with municipalities to ensure that students don't have or aren't left in the cold. And finally, like Bree mentioned, the Green Party is also looking towards abolishing tuition so that every student can have the education that they deserve, as well as eliminating student debt for existing students up to $10,000.
Wow, some big promises for students in from at least a couple of the parties. And well, all parties said something for students. Now it's your turn. I want to open it up to the audience. I'm going to ask you to be very succinct with your questions. So this would not be the time to make long statements. This is the time to ask a very targeted question. Julie, where are you? There we have our mic there, and here we go. Thank you. We have a mic there. Who would like to ask the first question? And this is always, let's look at who's brave. Who's going to ask that first question? Oh, we have Bill Thielman is going to ask the first question.
But I'm not brave. I'm not brave. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. Appreciate that, all candidates. Bill Thielman from the Better Transit and Transportation Coalition today. My question to you is, as we see the reduction in fossil-fueled or gasoline-powered vehicles, and as we have, as Mayor Cote has noted, the importance of TransLink and the Mayor's Council Transportation Plan, how would your party fund these groups in order to keep our transit and transportation system moving as the gas tax becomes less and less of a revenue source?
Okay, so decline in gas tax. So this is for all candidates. This time I'm going to ask Breen to go first. We're going to go Breen, Andrew, Jesse, and Talib.
Well, as an owner of an electric vehicle, I feel your question very much. We need more infrastructure also for charging stations. But as I said earlier, the NDP plan is to take oil and gas subsidies and move them immediately over to renewable energy and to retraining so that we don't leave people behind in fading industries. We also are looking at increasing tax by 1% in the highest tax bracket. And further, we are looking at aggressively going after the super rich class, the people that earn more than $20 million annually, who are also hiding a lot of income offshore. The Parliamentary Budget Office estimates it's between 15 and 25 billion annually, and that can go a long way to solving these issues.
Okay. I'll go Andrew.
Thank you. It's a multifaceted answer. I mean, first of all, we need to make sure the economy is growing strong because the best social program is a strong economy. And we believe that lowering taxes is an important part of that, both for individuals as well as for small business. This government that has been in place for the last 4 years has actually made an attack on small business. by increasing their taxes. And we have to realize that small business actually creates the most number of jobs that we have. Now, you asked about the funding of public transit. I mean, it was our government that brought in the $2 billion a year gas tax fund to invest in projects like this. And we've seen some terrific projects like I mentioned earlier. The Canada Line was part of that. And we have to find ways of continuing to finance public transit because we want to get people out of their vehicles. It's better for traffic and it's better for the environment. We also need to invest in technologies. As I mentioned, electric vehicles are out of the reach of many people today because they're too expensive. So we have to invest in new technologies to make electric vehicles more affordable. And that includes electric buses as well.
Okay. And over to you, Jesse.
Again, the 1% of the GST dedicated to municipalities, I think will go a long way to helping infrastructure projects and getting people moving, as well as canceling the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion project will save $13+ billion to the federal government that I hope could be used towards municipal or other infrastructure projects, clean energy projects that will help everyone in Canada.
Thank you. Well, I want to answer the question that you asked. I think it's a very specific question. I think we need to dig into this. I think one of the issues that has come up historically, I think particularly during the Conservative government and frankly in the past provincial regime, there was Mayor's Council had a very, very difficult time understanding whether or not their projects and their priorities were going to get funded. And I think what you've seen is that, as you know, as we speak, TransLink is finishing their consultations on the next phase of priority projects. And my goal as a member of Parliament for the Liberal Party will be to ensure that that plan gets funded and that the federal government does its part in supporting that plan. I think that's something that's really important. Our commitment to put 40% of every strategy for every plan that is put forward is an important one because regardless of where that money comes from, at the local level, there should not be a concern that the federal government will be an active partner in improving, in supporting, and in partnering with the province and with the municipalities and the Mayor's Council in ensuring that these important and critical projects get moved forward. It can't be a political game of hot potato. It has to be a priority, and we all need to be prepared to do our part. And if I'm elected, I'll make sure that I'm pushing hard for that.
Okay. Andrew wants a rebuttal, but we don't have rebuttals worked into the, so you'll have to get it in on the next question. Tanya Paz, we have a question over with Tanya Paz. Can I get a mic to Tanya? Thank you.
Shalom. This is a very rare opportunity for me because normally I would say no to an all-male panel. But a favor to Shauna, I'm here today. Okay, so we need SkyTrain actually works well for intra-city region. Within the region, intra-regional transportation, so do buses and C-bus, et cetera. We have commuter rail of West Coast Express. What about high-speed rail between major cities? Is that part of any of your plans across Canada? If so, details, please.
Okay, so we're going to go with Jesse, Talib, Breen, and Andrew.
In this era of climate emergency.
So some context there as well. So high-speed rail.
Yes, that was one of the announcements that Elizabeth made a couple days ago on the Green Transportation Plan, was that high-speed rail, as well as light rail throughout municipalities would be a huge part of her platform, of our platform. So again, using subsidies that are currently being given to oil and gas industry to support electric vehicles and electric rail throughout Canada is a major shift that our country needs to get people moving.
Yeah, thanks, Tanya. So as you know, the Liberal government has already started to look into and fund studies on high-speed rail. And I think this is important because as we look at ways in which we move between cities in Canada, this is going to be an increasingly important way for us to mitigate the use of roads, mitigate the use of cars, look at ways in which we can move people between cities in a meaningful way. So, I'll continue to be an advocate for that. I think our government has been a strong advocate for that, and partnering with partner cities that want to look into those things, I think is going to be an important component of that strategy.
Breen, over to you.
The NDP is an evidence-based party, and I think we need to look at other countries that have implemented high-speed rail and try to learn from what works and what doesn't work before we commit to anything. I think something that hasn't been mentioned yet also, which I know it doesn't touch exactly on your question, but nobody's talked about car sharing and how that's going to have an impact going forward on our future. And when you take car sharing and you combine it with automatic, driverless technology, we end up with a really different future for our transit and our long distance transit. So we need to be investing money into looking into those technologies and make sure we use them as well as we possibly can.
And over to Andrew.
Thank you. High-speed rail is one way to get people out of their cars, because that's really what we have to do, is we have to encourage people. North Americans have a love affair with their cars. And I lived in Europe, I lived in Asia. They don't have the same love affair, which is why they do have high-speed rail in many cities connecting most of the European cities. There's high-speed rail. In Asia as well, China and Japan they invented the electromagnetic high-speed rail. So these are certainly good options to look at to help get people out of their cars. We have far too many single passenger cars that are on the road today. So certainly car sharing is another way to encourage people to pool their resources, and which is what we're looking at. The shared economy is going to change the way we look at things dramatically. We're going through an industrial revolution right now where the shared economy and the digital economy are going to drastically change the jobs of today. In fact, the jobs of tomorrow will be very different from the jobs of today. 1/3 of all jobs in 15 years will be lost to automation. So we have to look at, and self-driving cars is one way that automation is going to take over from jobs.
Here we go. Who is next with their question? As I scan the room, we've got Alex, and then over to you, sir.
Thank you all for standing and engaging in this important conversation. Alex Boston, Renewable Cities. The fastest growth in greenhouse gas emissions since 1990 has been in road-based transportation. 30% increase in population since then, 70% increase in cars in Canada. And that's because of bad land use. We have $30, $40, $50 million transit stations in Greater Vancouver, and the land use regime hasn't changed around them in 30 or 15 years since they were built. How are you going to ensure that you respect local government's autonomy on land use, but ensure that land use is going to be integrated into long-term transit investment?
Okay, and this time I'm going to ask Andrew, Green, Jesse, and Talib in that order.
Okay, it's true. Transportation takes up a large part of our land use. If you look at the amount of land that's used for roads and for parking alone, I was recently at a forum where they were talking about cars that actually fly. Okay, and it sounds like the Jetsons, which it is, but that is the future. They said, forget about automated cars. We're going to have cars that actually fly, that don't use roads. So think about all the extra land we're going to have if and when that happens. The federal government has the jurisdiction over federal land. The province and the municipalities have jurisdiction over their lands. So they're the ones that have to come up with the priorities, so that we're happy to help them invest through different programs, but it's going to be the municipalities and the province that decides what they're going to do with most of their land, because most of the land is in their jurisdiction.
Green.
Well, I started off when I introduced myself, I talked about Gil Penalosa and the way he talks about land use. And we should work to ensure that when design is happening, that it encourages community development and community coming together. And that means thinking about land differently than we have up till now. So Gil would probably say we need to have a housing structure around our transportation that just makes more sense. We need to have shops at the ground level, and then on the other levels we need to build up so that we can take better advantage around the major arteries. So I think that's where the federal government can encourage that, but once again, it's up to the municipalities to implement.
Thank you. Jesse.
So the Green Party is proposing that we essentially get rid of the combustible engine by 2030 and move fully to electric vehicles and give people incentives in the meantime to purchase electric vehicles, getting people moving. We have a vision for the country where the majority of people don't have to drive in 2030. They can walk to work or take high-speed transit and rail. And so those that do, again, would have incentive to take electric vehicles.
And Talib?
Yeah, so thanks for that question, which I understood to be a question about land use. And I think it's one of the things that we really need to focus on. Look, one of the challenges, as was mentioned, is the federal government does not have jurisdiction over how people use land at the municipal level, or how municipalities zone. But what we can do, I think, is to ensure that we're putting in place, as we have done, a housing strategy that informs the type of housing that we support, whether it's partnership with communities, whether it's support for rental units for folks between 30 and 80,000 in income. But most importantly, I think it is about how we partner and how we encourage the provincial and particularly municipal governments to understand that this infrastructure that we build for transportation is about helping to build community. And municipalities have to, and in Vancouver, I know this well, have to realize that things are changing. Upzoning is important. Ensuring that we can build density is important. People need to be able to live in their communities, work in their communities, walk to see their parents, their grandparents, not have to worry about traveling for an hour and a half to work. So as the Member of Parliament, Vancouver Granville, I have committed to, and I will continue to commit to, working with and engaging with municipal partners to ensure that we have an open mind about how we deal with zoning in a meaningful, substantive way.
Andrew? Oh, I'm sorry, we've got through all of
thought I
those.
answered that one. I'm
No,
happy
we
to have
already
the time,
got
though.
those. We have two more. We might have a
Rebuttal.
chance for three more questions. And we have two questions, this gentleman here and then Michael there. And I was going to say a woman, sorry, and ideally a younger woman, but I see Jennifer back there. And so those are the three questions we're going to take. And if we can get one more, we will. So here we go, sir. You okay there? Maybe we can come away from, is there a mic that is causing this? Is there a? Okay. Is there something that is there a place we should stand?
Is it possible that the questions could come from the podium microphone?
None of the mics are working. It's worked up to now. Let's try it from here and then let's see what happens.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, is this working?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's working.
Well, thank you.
No. Okay, we're going to ask you to just come over here. Can you come to this mic right here? And Michael and Jennifer, if the two of you can make your way to this mic too, and we're going to go quickly. Thank you so much. And if you could introduce yourself as well.
Sure. So first of all, thank you all for coming. My name is Bhavin. So polling suggests over the past few years that there's a widening gulf of mistrust between you people, essentially elected officials who are passing public policies, and the citizens that will be affected by the issues that we're discussing today, whether it's transit, housing, and all these other essentially aspects of our lives that are going to be affected. What can you do personally to, reduce that gulf of mistrust? And essentially a secondary question is, how often do you guys use public transit?
A little personal question here. So Jesse, you're going to answer the question on overseeing the Gulf and how often you use public transit.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. I mean, I'm not an elected official yet. And, there is a sense of entitlement with especially the Liberal Party and our current Prime Minister and the Member of Parliament for Vancouver Centre, who's been in the job for 26 years. There's no way that she can understand what it's like to be a working person in Vancouver Centre. And so I do take transit all the time. I take the Canada Line to go visit my parents out in Delta, and it's great. Sometimes it's crazy busy, and I'm wondering why they didn't make the stations a bit bigger. I'm representative of the community that I live in, and I hope to be the next representative for Vancouver Centre. Thank you.
Well, I was about to say that we're all here talking about policy and not taking shots at one another, but that you just changed that. Look, I think none of us are elected. We're all here trying to earn people's support and vote. To me, what you do once you get elected is critical. How much time do you spend talking to people? How much time do you spend in the community? How much time do you actually spend listening to what folks have to say and engaging with the community? My commitment is to do that if I'm elected, and I intend to spend my time with members in the community hearing what they have to say. That's the only way you really understand how your job is to represent the folks in your riding. That's what we're all trying to do. And that's, to me, the most important thing. That's why a lot of us are out knocking on doors to hear people, but that has to happen once the election is over as well. And my commitment is to keep doing that. I built my career on consensus building, and that's what I intend to do. Now, I am lucky that I live in a place where I can walk pretty much everywhere I need to go. But if I need to get to the airport or to Richmond, I do take the Canada Line. But my universe is one where it allows me to walk. And when I'm trying to get to the North Shore to see my folks, I will often take SkyTrain if I'm not lucky enough, or SeaBus if I'm not lucky enough to have someone take me with them.
Thank you. And Andrew.
Thank you for that question, and I fully understand your distrust of federal governments. especially when you have a prime minister who makes over 200 promises and barely keeps any of them. It was just 4 years ago when he looked in the camera and said, I'm telling the Canadians the truth when I'm going to have a balanced budget by 2019. Well, folks, it's 2019. We're not even close to a balanced budget. Oh, and by the way, he also promised that 2015 was going to be the last election first past the post. Well, it's 2019, and hello, we're still having first past the post. So I fully understand your distrust. Look, in 2006, when the Conservative government was elected, we ran on 5 principles, 5 promises. Within 24 months, all of those 5 promises were made and kept. When we were in government with the stimulus program, I got together with the mayors and the MLAs in North Vancouver, and we got to 3 levels of government, sat down at a table. It's not rocket science. We came up with the priorities for the people of North Vancouver. And I'm proud to say that every single one of the priorities was funded through the infrastructure stimulus fund. And that's what I will do again if I'm elected member of parliament in North Vancouver. When it comes to taking public transportation, the C-Bus is the best harbor, the cheapest harbor cruise you can make. And I take the C-Bus on a regular basis to get downtown.
As I said, I am going to intervene just to ensure equality among all candidates. Breen.
I think our Conservative friend just endorsed proportional representation. The NDP promotes proportional representation, so I just want you all to know that. Also, I personally think that we should also be looking into proportional representation at the cabinet level of Canada. I think this will change the apathy that people feel in Canada. As far as public transit goes, I use public transit quite often, daily, most of the time. Lately, not so much because I have so many things to get to with the campaign that I resort to my electric car, which I've had since 2017, and which my app tells me I've diverted 7,000 kilograms of CO2 from the atmosphere since I started driving it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
How do families afford to buy a home? First thing they do is go to the bank, which tells them, we'll fund you up to 30% of your income. And so you get in your car and you drive to a sprawling suburb built on cheap land with few nearby services because because you can get an affordable home there. The next thing you do is to buy a second car. Transportation is the second largest family cost. So we have more cars, more driving, and more congestion. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities recently says that to have compact communities, the national standard should be that home and transportation combined should be 45% of income, and that's what should be funded. Will your party support the Federation's position?
Okay, so Breen, Andrew, Talib, and Jesse.
I just have to get something out of my pocket here. I don't know if you can see it, but my other car is with Moto Co-op. And I really believe that co-op car sharing is the way to go to help bring down the cost of having access to transportation. I have one vehicle. I've been married for 18 years. There are plenty of times when we need to go our separate ways and we can't make it happen because public transport is not where it needs to be. So fortunately, we've got Moto. And then social and co-op housing is part of the NDP platform. We want to promote that. We want to ensure that the upward pressure that's been on the market for decades is finally going to get some relief, and that people are going to be able to afford a place to live. Thank you.
Andrew.
Thank you. When it comes to housing affordability, everybody in Vancouver understands this problem. This is one of the most expensive places on earth, which is why our government, if we're elected in October, we have committed to rework the mortgage stress test, which was brought in by the Liberal government in 2018, which has made housing less affordable. In fact, for many people, it's made housing unattainable, especially for young people. We need to make sure that that this stress test is something which which is not too onerous so that people can't afford to buy a home. So we're going to rework the stress test. The other thing is this stress test doesn't allow people with existing mortgages to shop around for better rates. They're handcuffed to their current financial institution. We're going to rework it so that people can shop around and get better rates. We're also going to make housing more affordable by increasing the amortization period to 30 years. And here's something else we're going to do. We're going to launch an inquiry into money laundering in Canada, because money laundering and corrupt practices have increased the price of real estate by billions of dollars, and we have to get to the bottom of it. And furthermore, we're going to make surplus federal land available for affordable housing.
Tyler.
Yeah, so I guess things that are important to know is that our government has already taken initiatives and continued to work hard to make homeownership more affordable. We've supported first-time home buyers initiatives. We have built on the last 4 years' success in terms of being able to get more people into their homes. But we've also launched a 10-year housing strategy to work with municipal and provincial partners to support the creation of already 1,100 units that have been announced in Vancouver, but support for co-ops, support for multi-generational housing, support for community-based opportunities. But look, I just want to be clear about one thing. What the Conservatives are proposing here is actually very, very dangerous. And it's actually what led to the housing crisis in the US. Removing the stress test from how much money you can borrow is precisely what led to the crisis in 2008. Andrew's an economist, or as a business guy, should know better. Because doing this... No, hold on a second. Hold on. You said if you're going to talk about the stress test, let's be honest with Canadians, which is, I think, something that Mr. Harper did not do. Let's be clear. Unaffordability, Andrew, comes from the fact that you need to make it possible for people to earn an honest living, not buy the most expensive house you can because you can borrow what you like.
You're also going to introduce a federal speculation tax.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Exactly.
We are going to move to Jesse.
I'm just really excited to run for a party that has a female leader. And I think Elizabeth May should be the next Prime Minister of Canada. Sorry, I got a little distracted there. Yeah, no, it's insane that young people have been thrown this, opportunity or lack of opportunity from our existing status quo parties. And I've got a decent paying job. My partner has a decent paying job, and there's no way that we can afford a place or to buy a place in Vancouver in the vicinity that can fit myself and my stepchildren as well as they become teenagers. So, we would have to look into the suburbs, and that's the fate that many people, young people are facing. And so we need to look at maybe some other solutions than home ownership and think about investing in co-ops, investing in actual affordable rentals so that you can have a 3-bedroom home close to work where you can still walk to work and be able to get by every month. Because right now the rental market, anyone who's walked down Davie Street, it's just insane. Thank you.
I'm not sure if anyone answered your question, Michael, but that's fine. So over to Jennifer.
Thanks very much, Shauna. Hello, candidates. Hello, everyone. I'm Jennifer Conroy from Better Environmentally Sound Transportation. And the question I want to ask today has to do with our shifting demographics in Canada, but in Metro Vancouver, we will particularly feel with great concentration. By 2050, 1 in 4 in Canada's population will be over 65. And in 2036, 16 years from now, essentially, 1 in 4 of us will be 60 or over. And so what will your party do? What will you do to provide for the transportation choices for aging populations and communities, and not just seeing them as the passive recipients of services such as Handy Dart, as great as that is? There are going to be increasing numbers of people who have high expectations for their own independent choices in their mobility. So active transportation, independent choice, what we do.
So a question for you on active transportation, and also on a question on the seniors. So Tala, Breen, Jesse, and Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. When it comes to seniors particularly, I think one of the mistakes that often gets made is let's figure out where we're going to put them. And I think this is one of the great issues in our community. And we need to think about our seniors, my parents, my grandparents, who have now passed, were parts of our family and of our community. And we need to start remembering that seniors need to be able to be taken care of in their communities. They need to have the ability to age in place if they want to, find elegant, dignified solutions for aging. And we need to support those things, not just by saying, let's provide Handy Dart service, which is important so that they can get around, but also making sure that the infrastructure that they need, the wraparound services are available. And I think, and I'm proud that our government is committed to doing that, because that's how you take care of seniors, and that's how you allow them to continue to live vibrant lives that they want to live. Nobody, I think the idea that we should think about seniors in a way that is perhaps lesser is something that we've done historically. We need to really change the channel on this, because seniors are, as you say, a big part of the future of this country. We need to take care of them in a much more meaningful way.
Thanks so much, Tyler. Breen.
And we already have the example of how to take care of them in a more meaningful way. We can go to Mole Hill Housing Society, or we can go to Falls Creek Co-op, and we can see communities that come together and they support their seniors in a really incredible way. And when the federal government stopped supporting social and co-op housing, we started to lose that opportunity in Canada. I think we need to build on it. For transit for seniors, the really interesting wild card are the self-driving cars and what's going to happen with that. I know that Handy Dart has issues because seniors and people with disabilities are telling me that they get dropped off and then they can't be found to be picked up. I think we need to look at interesting solutions to the technology. I mean, we've had GPS for how many years now? It might be a good idea to look at giving the passenger a GPS locator when they get off so that they can be easily found when they come back. Federal government should be supporting these kinds of things, and the NDP is going to.
Thanks so much, Breen. Jesse.
So the Green Party has a proposal to double CPP income replacement. So I think that will go a long way to helping senior citizens get around. I'm just making this up right now on the spot, but not that point, but I think there should be dedicated transit for seniors, because often, I've been on the bus when I take it, it just feels like a bit of an unsafe space often for seniors. So maybe to have some more bus service around town that's going from Harrow Park Center to where seniors need to go, that's dedicated for them, that's paid by the public, would be, I think, a great thing for senior citizens.
Andrew.
Thank you. Most of the seniors that I know want to stay in their homes as long as possible. And one program that was recently proposed to be by one of my constituents, and she was citing Germany as an example, where they have a program where they actually match young people with seniors because seniors are living in big homes, often by themselves, with empty rooms. There's a lot of young people that need places to live, that need rooms. So you've got these seniors that with big houses, you've got these young people who need places to live. Why don't we find a way that we can introduce and have more young people living with seniors? And I talked this over with my campaign manager. He thought this was a great idea. So this is just one way. We have to think out of the box. We have to think about what are the best practices in other places. And this is just one of those ideas that came to mind. And obviously, when it comes to transportation, we need more accessible public transit. That's how seniors are going to be traveling in the future, and hopefully the near future. And that again is it's a regional and a provincial jurisdiction, but we should be encouraging more accessible public transit, and we should be encouraging more young people to live with seniors.
You're going to keep me going here. First, I want to say a big thank you to all of the people. Great questions. We are now at that time when we ask our candidates to do their closing statements. And if you remember, it started with Breen and came this way. So now we're going to start with Andrew first. You each have 2 minutes for your closing statements, and I will keep you to the 2 minutes, as you know. So Andrew, if you'd like to begin.
Thank you, Shauna. We're on the precipice of a new industrial revolution where it's predicted that 1/3 of all jobs will be lost to automation in the next 15 years. And the jobs of tomorrow will be very different from the jobs of today. We're also facing a climate change crisis that needs to be addressed head on. We have housing affordability issues, especially here in Vancouver. And all of these issues will affect where people live, work, and how we travel in the future. Now more than ever, we need a government that has a clear plan to address these issues head on, not just talk about them and have fun photo ops. We need a government that will actually walk the walk, not just talk the talk. And a government led by Andrew Scheer, a Conservative government, will deal with these issues head on. And here's how. First of all, we're going to invest significantly in green technology, because it was old technology that got us to this situation where we are right now with climate change. We need new technology to get us out of this situation. And that's why we're going to be focusing on investing in clean technology so that Canada can become a world leader in green tech. We will also make housing more accessible by reworking the mortgage stress test and by increasing the amortization period for mortgages. And we will also make surplus federal land available for affordable housing options. We will also launch an inquiry into money laundering in the real estate sector and work to root out the corrupt practices that have helped to inflate housing prices to where they are today. We will make life more affordable by lowering taxes. We've introduced a universal tax cut, tax credits for families and for seniors, and by eliminating the ineffective carbon tax, which has caused the price of everything to go up. Now, the last 4 years of a Liberal government and their broken promises have been a huge disappointment to a lot of people. I've knocked on over 4,000 doors in my riding of North Vancouver, and I can tell you that people are very, very disappointed with what's happened and what hasn't happened over the last 4 years. It's time to bring back good government, and a Conservative Party will do that. So on October 21st, please vote Conservative. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Jesse.
So I'm running because the climate crisis is the biggest crisis of our time, and I feel really proud to be running with the Green Party, who has the only authentic plan to combat the climate crisis. It's called Mission Possible. It's not going to be easy, but it is possible to get off fossil fuels and to keep our Paris climate commitments. We have a lot of great ideas at the Green Party, not just the environment, also affordable, livable income, like I mentioned, universal farmer care. We're the first party to propose that, universal childcare. And the great thing about these promises is that we're the only party that has a budget that's been costed by the Parliamentary Budget Officer. So it is possible to do these things. And we just need leadership that is willing to act. And I believe Elizabeth May and the Green Party are the ones that can make a difference for our kids and our sustainable future. Thank you.
Well, so if we think back to the last 4 years, Canadians are better off today than they were 4 years ago. We've lifted 850,000 kids out of poverty. The Liberal government has made unprecedented investments in partnering with communities to build infrastructure. We've got a 10-year housing plan in place that needs to continue, that supports all manner of creative housing solutions across this country and here in Vancouver. We have worked with partners across this country, including here in British Columbia, with the City of Vancouver and with the province, to advance critical transportation infrastructure projects. We've committed to supporting the strategy that the Mayor's Council hopefully will put forward soon, and to making sure that we partner with the province to ensure that that actually gets delivered. Look, we can no longer go back to the Conservative era of offloading critical problem solving to the private sector. That hasn't worked. What works is when government partners with communities, with organizations, with different levels of government to actually achieve our goals. We need to keep building the infrastructure that is required, the transportation infrastructure. We need to support the housing infrastructure that is required here in Vancouver and across British Columbia to keep us moving and to keep us living healthy, quality lives. So what does that mean? We've already put a price on carbon. We've got the most aggressive oceans protection strategy in the history of this country in place. We've done this work for the climate. We're going to continue doing this work to protect the climate. But what comes next? We need to make sure that we support the Mayor's plan, as I've said. We need to make sure that we keep going forward on protecting our climate in a meaningful way. We need to build on the 10-year plan and ensure that more units of housing get developed here in Vancouver that are affordable for folks that are making between $30,000 and $80,000, that we partner with community organizations to increase the livability here, to support those community organizations. And look, Jesse is right. We have a climate crisis. And you have the choice between a Conservative government that doesn't even acknowledge that climate change is real. Andrew may, but his party does not. And we will actually work across stakeholders to make sure that there is a real plan for climate change that can actually get delivered. That's the difference here. We'll actually be in a position to move forward on dealing with climate change in a meaningful way while addressing housing, affordability, and transportation right here in Vancouver and across this country. Thank you.
The difference in Vancouver Centre is it's a choice between the Liberals and the NDP. The Conservatives are third place in our riding. Generally, in 2011, we came very close to unseating Hedy Fry. I started talking about the 880 rule. And the reason I did was I was hoping that in everybody's mind would be planted the seed of something more than just big numbers and big promises, but intention. And what were people actually talking about up here today? Were they talking about numbers or were they talking about people? That's what this whole thing is about. We need to make sure that we have transit options that are supporting people and supporting all people, whether they're seniors or people with disabilities, people from marginalized groups, and the middle class. That's really what it's about. The NDP has values about uplifting everyone. That's what our goals have been. That's what they've always been. If you take a look at the New Deal for People from the NDP, you'll find 109 pages of solid, uplifting policy. So, in closing, let's bring people together so that we make our communities stronger. Let's sustain our local businesses while we do it. Let's bring people together. That's what it's all about. The NDP is in it for you. And so if you want to elect a member of parliament that's going to work for people, then elect me on October 21st. Breen Willett. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I want to take a moment again and acknowledge the time and energy that each of these individual candidates put into serving us. Campaign periods are not easy. They are grueling. I suspect you're each going to one community after another, and knocking on doors. And just want to say, on behalf of Moving in a Livable Region and the SFU, Morris J. Wass Center for Dialogue, thank you for being such a great panel today. Jude, over to you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Again, a huge thank you to our panelists. Thank you so much for agreeing to be here. And thank you to everybody who's with us here and everybody who's joined us online. Before we go to end this forum, I just want to remind everybody, please, you came here. It's great voter engagement. The more important thing is making sure that you're registered to vote and to check that your voter registration is updated. You can do this online at www.elections.ca. Please remember that voting day is October 21st, with advanced voting taking place from October 11th to the 14th from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. There are 500 Election Canada offices across the country. You can vote at any one of them right now through special ballot until October 15th at 6 p.m. Lastly, a lot of amazing work has gone in by student associations working with Elections Canada across the country. You can vote at select campuses across Canada from October 5th to the 9th. You can find out all the other ways to exercise your right to vote online at www.elections.ca. What's the URL again? What's the website thing?
www.elections.ca.
Okay, I assume you all got that. Thank you all for being here and have a very safe trip home.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you.